If you've been a listener to the podcast for any amount of time, you know I'm not the biggest fan of the current education system. I think it's great for people that know what they want to do and they're very set on their path. People like that have known they want to be a doctor or a lawyer from the moment they were born or whenever they made that decision. But I just think there's a lot of high school kids who go to college because they think that's the next best step and they make a decision on what they want to do for the rest of their life. And sometimes they do it and they're unhappy because it's not who they truly are or aligned with, or they feel guilty chasing or doing something else because they spent all this money getting a degree in what they want to do. I've been a huge advocate of giving opportunities to kids or exposing them to more ideas at an earlier age of other possibilities of things they can do. In today's episode, we have a guest who is helping build a company that does exactly that. I can't wait for this interview and I can't wait to bring it to you guys. So let's just get it going. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm super excited for this interview and I'm excited to have you guys back for another episode. This one's going to be good. And one of the reasons why it's going to be good is we have a very special guest who is working in a business that I personally am very passionate about this topic, helping kids, helping the next generation learn more about entrepreneurship, give them more opportunities outside of just going to college for the sake of going to college. So today we have Samantha Asante from LaunchX Entrepreneurship Program. And I am so excited to have you here, Samantha. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, I am excited to have you here. Brittany actually from our team was actually like, hey, we got this email and this person, you need to check her out. I think she'd be great for the podcast. And I read your bio and what you guys are all about, and I'm super excited. So let's start off by just having you give a little bit of a description of what it is that you do.
Yeah. So at LaunchX, what we do is we actually really focus on entrepreneurship education, but focusing on high school students. So we hear about incubators, you hear about accelerators, and all of that is targeted towards adults. But what we really believe is that a shift in the economy and a real change in our ecosystem is going to start with the students and their big ideas. So we really empower these students that are hungry to be able to make an impact. We empower them to make that impact now. They don't have to wait until they grow up, right? To decide what they're going to do next. And we really give them the opportunity to do that, in not just from an educational standpoint, but while they're in our program, they launch revenue churning businesses. So really showing them that they can be entrepreneurs today.
Okay. I love all of that. And I want to dive into that, but I want to hear a little bit about how you got to this point. Were you yourself an entrepreneur? Like, did you get started in high school? Like, give us a little bit of a background on your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I never set out to be an entrepreneur. I feel like for a certain generation, that's true. And for mine, I think that was not the norm. You go to college and you kind of you find a linear path you can take. I did Teach for America after I graduated from undergrad. I was in the classroom, and as an educator, I found a whole slew of problems affecting my students. And I started trying to come up with solutions for them. And one of those problems for me was understanding what my students were bringing into my classroom every single day quickly, so that we could address issues and they could actually learn. And so I ended up actually building an ed tech tool to solve a problem I was experiencing. And from there, that grew into a large business. And I ended up on the pathway of entrepreneurship simply by trying to solve a problem I saw. I didn't seek out to become an entrepreneur. And so what was really interesting about my journey is that I had to learn business and entrepreneurship as I already was building the business. So every day, everything was learning something new. I'm hiring folks that are smarter than me. And, it's just a crazy world to be in. And the tools I got from becoming a leader and being a business owner and being an entrepreneur I think served me far beyond my organization and even the impact we had with students. It really helped me understand myself. And so it left me wondering why we don't try to instill that kind of mindset with youth earlier on. Because even though I was pretty young when I started my company, like I made Forbes list at like 26, I still felt like I was old, right? I was like, oh, I wish I would have done this 5 years ago. And so,
Right.
in thinking about that and the lessons I learned, I wanted to get those lessons to students sooner. And that's where my work started to align with that of LaunchX.
I want to go back to the story real quick. And I agree with you. I feel like that's the only way to learn entrepreneurship is like you just like you can take all the courses, you can take all the classes, you can all the degrees, but like until you're in the trenches, you don't really know how to, you're just like trying to figure it all out. And I feel like every business has so many different challenges and things like that. The only way to learn is to get your hands dirty. But I'm curious, like when you were a teacher and you said they would bring their problems
Mhm.
into the classroom, like what specifically were you seeing as far as the problems in that space?
Yeah. So I actually taught in one of the oldest projects in the Southern US. And so my students were bringing in quite literally generational trauma into the classroom. And so their emotional regulation really wasn't there. And oftentimes what was happening is I had to, especially because I taught at a tier 3 school, meaning we were very intensive around testing and all of that kind of stuff. You're having to like push forward in a lesson, but your kid like didn't eat breakfast that morning. They got in a fight on the way to the classroom. And so now they can't focus for the 90 minutes that you have them. And so you're teaching them and they're not learning. And so it was really me trying to figure out what are they carrying into the door? Like, how are your basic needs being met? Did you have a mean conversation with somebody in the hallway? And so now you're going to lose 15 minutes of learning time. And those are the kinds of things they try to tell you when you're a teacher, like, oh, have it one-to-one conversations, but you have less than 90 minutes with
Right.
35 kids. It is impossible. Right. So I was just trying to figure out how I can teach them to self-regulate while also giving me real-time information.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is it's almost like therapists per se. It's like you're working on their nervous system, like getting their nervous system to calm down. You're figuring out like what's going on in their personal, like validating them and their emotions and all that stuff. I don't know. I didn't go through like I'm obviously not a teacher and I didn't go through a credential program, so I don't know what they teach. But I would assume they don't really prepare you for a lot of that sort of stuff in the college system. But it's interesting that you developed something to help with that, and so you developed Click. Is it Click Engage? If I remember correctly. What specifically did that company do?
Oh, so that was a journey because I am not technical. I do not know how to code. I was a non-tech founder of what became a tech company. And what I did is I created an app that allowed students to do an emotional check-in as they entered the classroom. So usually like an iPad, or for the high school students, they have their own devices.
Mhm.
When they came in the classroom while they were doing their bell ringer activity. Once they finished, they did their 5 question survey. And then, so by the time I was starting class, I had an overview of every single one of my students, how the class was doing that day. And I could either make a choice to like move through it, do some activities, or just completely stop, pivot, and reset everyone. Um, and so it was really helpful. And then the views went up to the administration as well. So if a whole school was opted into the system, they would actually be able to send additional supports to classrooms that looked like they needed additional need that day.
Oh, that's amazing. And how are you able to grow that and scale that? Was it literally just like walk to school? Like what was the sales and
Oh, yeah.
marketing like?
I would not recommend direct to school sales for any first time entrepreneur.
Good to know.
But really, yeah, it was starting from what I knew and who I knew. So our pilots were with individual teachers, individual classrooms. I was still teaching when I was doing the first MVP, and then from that, it was just yeah, literally school by school. And then what I did later on was I established larger partnerships. So I ended up having a partnership with Teach for America National, where we were able to go into select cities and kind of go top down in that way. But yeah, those first few years, getting principals on board, helping them find funding to pay for us because that's
Right.
not something that's funded in schools,
Mm.
and really just doing it one by one.
How much did you guys charge for a service like that?
Oh man, it was about $5 per student, on average. And then if there was trainings and other things, because some schools, I believe social emotional learning it's a part of my vocabulary. It's something that I know really well, but a lot of schools, their staff weren't familiar with the terminology, let alone how to address students' needs around it. So they were like, "This tool is great, but if we implement this with our teachers, they're going to need support on figuring out what to do with this information." So then there was a whole training component we had to add in as well.
Yeah. And that's what I kind of talk about a lot on the podcast is like, you just don't realize when starting a business, a lot of the things that will come up are needed. And that sounds like it's one of them. It's kind of like, cool, I had this idea of this thing. And then you ran into a problem and then you got to figure out a solution to that problem. And it just feels like you're constantly like stacking onto it over
Yeah.
and over and over again. It's just a constant development. But another thing we talk about on the podcast is that you never know where something is going to lead you. And I always say what you start with will never be what you end with. And it sounds like that business kind of led you to LaunchX, which you're doing now. Is that correct? Or was there something in between there?
There was a little bit of in between. So it wasn't like I came across LaunchX and I was like, this is my next step. Coming out of COVID with my company that served schools, there was a lot I had to grapple with. And when I looked at the needs compared to the initial problem we were trying to solve, I felt like our solution would have to become something entirely different in
Mm.
order to meet the needs in our new world. And so I sat with that for a while before deciding that it wasn't going to make sense to pivot that broadly.
Right.
And so I made the really hard choice to shut down. And it's still hard because every now and then we still have schools like reaching out and be like, can we use this? Ah. Because it really was, we were making a big impact, but impact is always front and center for me. And if I don't believe that we're going to be able to make a complete impact in our direct service method, I don't feel right in that work. Right. So that was a really hard choice. So in that choice, I had to then decide like, who am I now? And what do I do beyond this company that essentially at that point I had become? It was my first company. I was the founder, and my name and the company's name were completely interchangeable.
Right.
And so I took about a year. I was also a new mom. And I decided to just like do some consulting, do some different things to figure out what aspects of the work, being an entrepreneur, I loved, and what elements I wanted to be able to bring to my new role. And it was through that work that the alignment with LaunchX came.
Okay. How is building a business while being a mom? Because I have 3 kids myself, and it's not the easiest thing in the world. And at least that's my experience. How was it for
Yeah,
you?
it wasn't easy. So I always tell people, like, if you want to understand the life of a founder, I was 40 weeks pregnant and I was doing investment calls, and I just like still
Mhm.
have, because it was on Zoom, right? So it was because we were in this COVID world, and I literally was making meetings with investors. I was raising a Series A, and they would go, okay, so when can we have a follow-up call? I'm like, well, wait 6 to 8 weeks. And that was just kind of the journey. It was really crazy. I remember being on calls from the hospital after I had the baby,
Yeah.
because you are at the helm and the work doesn't really ever stop. Um, and so I think it was crazy, but it's also exciting and motivating. And even though the schedule can feel nuts, at the same time, you are able to create the kind of work environment that you want to be a part of so that it can connect with you and your family as well.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I personally have never had to raise money for any of the businesses we've started. Like this business here it's pretty easy to get started. It's just a podcast, and you do these things and we sell stuff. But I can't imagine, because I would imagine that those calls are pretty nerve wracking. Like you get like it's do or die. You get the money or you don't, and if you don't, then it's like, okay, cool. Now I'm back at the drawing boards. How much money did you guys end up raising? And I'm assuming, were you able that you hit your goals? Were you able to hit your goals?
So we did for our pre-seed. I actually ended up deciding to do dissolution during our Series A. So we didn't end up finishing raising the Series A.
Okay.
But we raised almost for about $400,000. So it was
Wow. Amazing.
almost $500,000. And then but it was a mix of, I would say the pre-seed round was really interesting because it was a mix of like accelerator financing and then um, less VC financing. So Series A was when I was sitting in front of venture capitalists and trying to convince them that kids' feelings matter and, all of these
Yeah.
things. So that was a different kind of experience. Pre-seed was great because that's when you get to interact with the people who care about your mission already. So it's really just selling them on what you can accomplish with their money.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, I personally love the idea, and it's something we've been preaching on this podcast. I mean, it's even in the name of our podcast, New Generation Entrepreneurship. I just think that the way the world is going and the way that the educational system is set up, especially college and a lot of that stuff, it just doesn't set our kids up for the future that's coming, or honestly, the future that's already here, let alone the future that's coming. I mean, what I do for work, what I do in our business, it didn't even exist like 10 years ago, and new things keep popping up. So I personally love it. Let's move into the story of like when you started it and launched it. Like, is it when you started it, is it the same thing of what you guys did today? And then how did you start bringing on schools or customers or clients? And I guess, who are your clients? Is it the students, the parents, the schools? Like, how does it all work?
So focusing specifically on LaunchX. So LaunchX actually was founded by Lori Stack almost 11 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, so it's a little bit older. She started it as a summer program within. It was housed under MIT. So for the first, I would say like 4 or 5 years of the program, it was at MIT, which also helped create a strong foundation. Not just because our model is heavily reliant on the quality of speakers and mentors, and so as you can imagine, being based at MIT gave us a really great advantage there. And it also gave namesake, right, to and validity to the organization. And so she was able to build the organization out of there. Around year 5, we spun out of MIT and we have been operating completely independently so that we could expand our reach. So we wanted to be able to go to other universities. We wanted to be able to support our students in more flexible ways. And so that's kind of where things have been now. But our target audience is students. It's one of those interesting things where, I mean, obviously, students are not the ones paying out of pocket for the
Right.
program. Very rarely have we ever seen that. So, really, the customer is their parent, but the one who has to say, "Mom, Dad, this is what I want to do," that's the student, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
And so that's who we serve. And then we kind of decide year over year where we're going to serve and send our program. And this is our first summer back on campus since before COVID. So the last 2, 3 years, we ran our program virtually entirely.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask. Yeah, like, is this integrated into the school system, or is it like a separate thing that they do on their own? It sounds like it is integrated into the school system now, or is it not?
No, so it's not. So it's something they, in the same way that you would do maybe a summer camp or a college prep program during the summer. We are in that same sphere. So it's something that students do on their own. We did experiment for a while with a better alignment with school systems. So we did have a clubs program that we ran. We piloted for a year or two, a few years back now, and that program was tough for all the reasons that I said when I was with my company, which is working directly with schools, being able to get them to provide like in-kind resources, all of that kind of stuff. It's just really um, manpower intensive and it can really strap capacity. But we did try to figure out how we could bring our program to schools directly so that we could reach those students that weren't already showing a desire to be a part of this kind of program and get them excited for it.
Yeah. I mean, I love this. And I think entrepreneurship, I think nowadays has almost become like the cool thing with kids. Like when I was in school, like I graduated high school in 2002. Like no one even, I didn't even know what the word entrepreneurship was. Like I knew business owner, I knew all this stuff, but nowadays I think Gary Vee probably had a lot to do with that. But I mean, with all the content, all the TikToks and here's how to make money and all this stuff, it's like, it's almost cool now. I've been invited to talk to a few different like high school classes about entrepreneurship. And it's like the level of awareness they have of different things, even just like what a profit and loss statement is and just stuff. I'm like, I had no idea what any of this stuff was when I even started a business. Um, like that I just had to figure out along the way. They kind of know. Has it been a pretty easy sell or has it been kind of difficult? What has it been? What's the experience been of like growing and scaling this out?
Yeah, I think so. I will say we don't have a lack of interest, right? So students year over year are really excited to be a part of our program. Our applicant numbers look great year over year. Making sure that students, it's the quality of students, right? So it's what changes and shifts over time and kind of based on what's happening in society is student interest in how they approach the idea of entrepreneurship. So not every student wants to be a change maker and they don't want to have social impact. And so it's helping the students that may not fit into the passion pathway figure out what matters to them and how they're going to care about this work long term. And so that's the part that's always a little bit tricky to navigate. But in general, I honestly think what you're saying, it's timely. I mentioned it's been around about a decade longer than that. I was when I also was in school and we didn't have majors in college that were about entrepreneurship or social entrepreneurship. I remember like one class getting started and thinking it was such a silly concept, right? And so, but now every university has an entrepreneurship program, not even just a couple classes. And so I think the frame of mind around this idea of creating something of your own and building and changing things in real ways is just, it's there and it's becoming more and more prevalent. So we have definitely, I think timing wise, it was just a perfect alignment with where schools and society are moving.
Awesome. I kind of want to like move the conversation into like what the program looks like. I have a very specific question around fear. Because we work with a lot of entrepreneurs. I mean, our client base is all entrepreneurs. Usually they're more adults, people in their, sometimes we get some people in their 20s, but usually it's 30s, 40s. It's usually people want like just starting a business or people that have been plateaued in business and can't like break through. But the biggest thing usually stopping them is like the fear of taking a risk. So there's the fear of like, investing a certain amount of money or putting money into ads, or even a fear of just changing who they are as a leader or, losing. Cause sometimes when you're at a plateau, sometimes you have to lose a version of who you are currently and move into a new version of yourself. And there's just so much fear around that. From my experience with my own kids and working with adults is that my kids are so much more flexible on those sort of like taking those risks and doing those fears just aren't there yet. But as an adult, I feel like sometimes you have achieved so much that you're not willing to risk it anymore. How is that experience like with high school students? Do they have any sort of fear or worry or concern, or is it mostly just kind of like optimism and just like ready to go after it? What is their attitude towards it?
So that's one of the coolest things about working with high school students specifically is like that barrier for the most part isn't there. There's of course students that feel some level of and they're inhibited a bit in their decision making or are students who are a little bit more introverted, being able to step outside of themselves and take risks with certain aspects of the work, like pitching and all of that kind of stuff. We definitely see fear show up in that way, but it's more about confidence building than it is about overcoming a huge fear. Um, with our student population, it's just so cool. They believe wholeheartedly in what they're going to accomplish and that it's going to work. As
Mm.
adults, you have like a running list of all the things that can go wrong, right? And you're like, I've seen this happen and I've seen this happen, and it can prevent us from taking the right kinds of risks. Whereas with high school students, like you're saying, like they have had less experience, for the most part, to be able to stop themselves from taking risks. And entrepreneurship is about risk taking. So we really see them jump in the deep end. And sometimes our mentors have to rein them back in and just like, how only got 4 weeks to build that. Like, how are we really going to get there? And that's such a fun challenge to have versus trying to push people further, which sometimes can be more difficult.
Yeah. Do you guys incorporate some of that like personal development sort of thing, mindset work into the program?
Yes, so we do, and we're adding even more components of that this year as well. But we do a lot of work around team building. So a huge core tenet of our program is the community and the founding teams. So students are based on like a ton of different factors. They're based in a team of about 4 or 5 other students. So we help them understand that like founders are, it's well known that, right, if you don't have the right founding team, a startup will not be successful. And so we help students understand how to work with one another in a really great way and how to balance skill sets. And so that's a huge piece of our program, is working within their teams, and we give
Mm.
them the tools around that. So there's lessons built into our curriculum about how to engage with one another, how to engage with customers, how to understand where they fit into this world of entrepreneurship.
Right.
But they also have the direct mentorship as well to help them problem solve as things come up, which I wish I had when when I was
Oh,
founding, someone to kind of mediate situations for you as they arise.
yeah. I mean, this program sounds so valuable because I started my business, I had a couple of them, but I first got into like playing around with it probably in my mid 20s is when I probably got started. I got started by building websites, driving traffic to them and just flipping them. It's just that's all like all we did. And then we started we're at where we are today through different variations of bin pivots and things like that. But the thing that I was an arrogant little know-it-all when I got started into business. And I was like, I know it all, I'm fine. And I thought I was mentally tough. And I didn't realize how much of a personal development journey entrepreneurship was and how much of a humbling journey it was. And I'm 38 now, or no, 39. And so it's been, I don't know, 13 years or something like that. But I have completely changed who I was back then on like hyper speed. And even the idea of having mentors, I was like, nah, I don't need that. And I'm just like, God, I was so stupid. so to have access to something like that as like a 16, 17 or 18-year-old, I mean, it's priceless. It's so, and especially when they're so young, where they sometimes may not develop that level of arrogance that I did when I was in my 20s. And you kind of catch them before they get to that stage and before they're like released into the world is just so valuable. My question is actually about the mentors. Who do you guys bring in to do that?
Yeah, so there's a couple different kinds of mentors our students have. So we have in our virtual program, we have our instructors, also in our in-person program as well. But our instructors themselves are actually really well established and seasoned entrepreneurs. A lot of times they're folks who might be running entrepreneurship or innovation programs at the university level, and they have that capacity to support a summer work. And
Right.
so our instructors themselves are serve as mentors to about 5 or 6 teams each. So they teach the classes, and then they have their set number of teams that they actually mentor on a weekly basis. In addition to that, we bring in outside mentors, and we have what we call like mock boards, where students get to, on a weekly basis, get in front of 4 or 5 different mentors and get feedback as if they were an advisory board. And so they come in with an agenda. Here's where we're at. Here's our problem. This is what we're trying to solve, and they get that real time feedback so that they can be pushed forward. And there are, I think this, like you were talking about arrogance and different. It's a personality trait. So there's definitely. I felt like I didn't know at all what I was doing, so I said, "Give me all the help." right? And so there's levels to it. There's a you and an I in every group. And so having those mentors there to push back on those different personality types and pull stuff out of those who might be more hesitant, that's really a big piece of how we do this work.
I love that. I love that you guys bring in seasoned entrepreneurs too. One of the biggest things that I always talk about is the difference between knowledge and knowing. It's like you don't learn to ride a bike by having all the knowledge on bike riding. You learn to ride a bike by actually doing it, and then you become a better teacher, a better mentor because you just understand it better. So I love that you guys bring in seasoned people who've actually done this before. I mean, that's incredibly valuable for the students. Does every student going through the program, is it focused on like being a founder of like a big, huge company? Or is it, could like if someone came in and is like, hey, I just want to open up like a local coffee shop or bakery or something, like, do you guys go to that like smaller business, or is the focus more on bigger business or startup sort of businesses that require investment?
So it really varies. We build on student interest. So the same way that they're teamed really intentionally coming into the program, a part of the teaming process is actually interest alignment. So we have a variation. There's students who want to build the next amazing AI tool, who are in health tech, and they have all these big dreams and ambitions in terms of where their company will scale. And then there are the students who really want to figure out how to establish something locally in their community on the ground level. There's students who want to create physical products and are looking for manufacturers during the first couple weeks of the program. And then there's the students who are coding some incredibly amazing algorithms, right? So there's a variation across the board in terms of our students and what their needs are, and where their interests lie. And we try our best to make sure that they are aligned in their groups so they can move whatever kind of company they want to build forward.
I love that. I mean, because like me personally, I when I was younger, I'm like, I just want to build like the next Facebook or something. It's like this big, huge company. And then as I got into business, I'm like, you know what? I don't want that. I'm like, I have 3 kids. They're young. I want to be able to spend time with them. Like our company now does 2.5 million a year. I don't have to work that much. And I'm like, I'm good. Like I work 10 hours a week. We're making great money. And then we're actually looking at buying a couple local businesses or starting a couple local businesses now. But the intention there is like, let's just keep it at 1 million or 2 a year, keep it like, just get it pretty systemized and not have to like, it shouldn't be owner operated. And just like, let it set and forget. But this idea of what I originally had when I first got started was like building this big $100 million company. I'm like, I don't have that anymore. That desires has kind of gone away. And so it's great that you guys can facilitate whatever it is that they want to do. We had a person on the podcast about 6 months ago, and I always kind of operate on this belief that you should have a general passion for what you want to do. And he told me he thought the opposite. And I was like, well, explain that to me. And he said, well, he's like, I had a conversation with my son, and my son said, I'm very passionate about motorcycles and dirt biking, and I want to build a business around that. And he said, sometimes business isn't necessarily about following your passion. It's about building something that benefits people, solves a problem, but allows you to follow your passion. And he said, so maybe we don't look just at dirt biking, but we look at what else can you do? What else would you like to do so that you can build a machine, build the system, build the process, build the team that gives you the freedom to go dirt biking whenever you want. And I was like, that's really interesting. But for me, what it really brought was like, man, so many different people have so many different desires or visions or ideas of what they want. Some people may want that social impact like you're talking. Some may just want something that gives them more time. Someone might want something that gives them more money, or a combination of both. So I love that you guys facilitate both of that. My question to you is it pretty easy for them to figure out what they want? Or like, how does that process work? Do you guys just expose them to all sorts of different types and they choose, or they have a general idea of like what they want to do before they come into the program?
Yeah, so we do an opportunity identification process with them as part of their pre-work, helping get their juices flowing, helping them narrow down their interests and their focus through a ton of pre-work activities, a lot of things that you might have seen, that people might have seen in like business schools, different programs. And we take a whole bunch of those kinds of activities, and we help students narrow their focus that way. It does not mean that when they now that they're narrowed down, they're matched with a team who also wants to build one of our student teams last year, neck pillows that are more aerodynamic. I don't know what they were
Yeah.
doing, but they built like travel pillows, right? That were a better fit for people. And, just, it's not, they might have honed in on that idea on day one and they're ready to hit the ground running. Right.
Right.
But the reality is most of our teams don't do that. Right. So they come in, they have a general idea of what they want to build. They get to their team, they get into a rhythm in the first few days, and they realize their ideas are not going to work, or maybe they were all trying to approach the same problem, but their solutions are totally misaligned. And so it can take some time for them to iterate on their ideas, but it's their peer group that helps really get them there, with the support of the mentor. So there are the students that come in the door, their team is ready to go, and they say, this is what we're building. And that's what they focus on the whole time. But more commonly, we see students come in with an idea, with a passion, with a problem they want to solve, and they kind of pivot and move until they figure out a way they can solve it in a tangible way.
Gotcha. Love it. Okay. So I still have a ton more questions. So I hope you're still good to go. I want to know, or my next question, I guess, is about the price point. How do you guys structure the pricing of the program?
Yeah. So our program actually encompasses, because we run online and we run in person. Most of our in-person costs go to room, board, all of that stuff being on campus. It also goes to staffing. So the same thing with the online program. A huge chunk of our program cost goes to summer staff, bringing in those lead instructors, doing working on the curriculum, providing components of the different pieces of business building, access to simulations, all of that kind of stuff to the students. And so it really goes directly into their learning and their experience overall. And so that's, our program is scaffolded in cost based on if it's online or if it's that in-person program.
Gotcha. And what does that price range look like?
Yeah. So the price range is from $5,000 to about $9,000. We do have one in-person program that runs closer to the $5,000 range. I believe it's $5,600, and that is our shorter term. It's like a 2-week innovation program. So it just is shorter, less room and board.
I mean, to have access to what they have access to at that young of an age for that price point, it's, to me at least, sounds like a no-brainer. I mean, you can spend. I mean, I did spend way more than that trying to build a business without any of that, and wasted way more money than that.
Yeah.
That I could have just gotten when I was younger. So I love that. I think it's a great price point. And what are some of the biggest successes that you've seen come through? Because you said they actually could start real companies during that. Have you seen any of them just take off and continue after the program?
Yeah. So we've had several students actually go on Shark Tank. So we've had students.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're an international program. So there's like lots of different kinds of like Shark Tanks Internationals, different things like that. But yeah, we've had students go on to Shark Tank. We've had students who have continued their LaunchX businesses. We actually commonly see students stay with one or two members of their original founding team. So they might have moved on to a new business or new idea, but they're still working with their founding team members. Last summer was huge for us. We had only our online program running, and our students by end of program, so demo day, so 5 weeks total, did more than $22,000 in revenue.
So they only have 5 weeks to go. Like, that's how long the program is, right?
Yeah. And they can't come in with an idea that's already, or like a company that they've already started. So they go from zero to market in 5 weeks.
God, just even to make like $100 from 0 to 5 weeks would be impressive. So would I know any of the companies that were on Shark Tank? Do you remember what any of them are?
I don't, not off the top of my head. Not off the top of my head.
It's guys just curious.
Yeah. I know it's like all over our website and stuff. So I could definitely share it later too.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I love the program. I love what you guys are doing. My long-term goal down the road is to eventually do something with kids and entrepreneurship. We're just not that part of my journey yet, but it's amazing to see you already doing this. I think it's just so necessary. And I think, I don't know. I just think the way the current college system is set up is, it just like, I just personally think it's crazy for you to ask an 18-year-old what they want to do for the rest of their life, and then have them pay $100,000 or whatever it is over 4 years to get a degree in that. And I just think it's crazy. And I love seeing that there's opportunities for kids to be like, look, there's other ways of doing things and looking at things. And so I absolutely love what you guys are doing. If people wanted to learn more about what it is that you do, or maybe even sign their kids up or learn more about you personally, where can they go?
Yeah, absolutely. So to learn more about our program, you can go to launchx.com. Our YouTube channel is ripe with content in terms of webinars, mini talk sessions, and even lots of showcases of students from the past. So everything from their application videos to their pitch is at the end of program. So it's a really cool place to get a sense of what we do. But our website is where you would go to start. And then I'm available most easily on LinkedIn, just by my name. It's Samantha Asante on LinkedIn. But yeah, our students, I mean, if you want to sign up, if you're interested, or even if the price point is a barrier, one of the things you talked a bit about how we try to create different access points, right? So helping students understand the place of college and their journeys. We also want students to understand how they could leverage entrepreneurship to get them further down their education journeys as well, too. So we understand that not every student can afford school, or even, and just really needs another form of income, right? Figuring out the space of entrepreneurship is so big for that. So with those kinds of students in mind as well, we also offer like financial aid packages and all of that kind of stuff. So that cost of our program also isn't a barrier to knowledge either.
I love that. And is the website just launchx.com?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So the best place to go would be launchx.com, or just to follow up with you on LinkedIn, correct?
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on today, sharing a little bit about your journey, your story, and what you guys do. Again, I can't express it enough, but I absolutely love this. I think there should be more people doing it. I wish schools would just do it on their own. But I think we're a long ways from that actually happening. But again, thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing everything with us today. So thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me on. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, I love it. All right, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on iTunes. And again, if you are interested in checking them out, or even possibly sending your kid, honestly, this could be one of the best things you do for your children. I wish something like this existed when I was in high school. Just head over to launchx.com, check them out, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.